So, welcome, Roberta, and thanks so much for taking the time out of your day to talk with us. I'm already being interrupted here. Okay, here we go. Sorry. So, I'm sorry. So, go right ahead.
Well, it's great to be here. And as you know, the church there was my home church for more than 25 years. So it's really, really great to be back, even though it's virtually, and happy to help out. Um, like I mentioned to you when you first reached out to me, I don't have magic answers for this. We're all experiencing something that's very new. The term unprecedented has been used far too many times, but it's true. And also the uncertainty of not knowing how long this is going to last, or what phases are going to look like, or what, whether we'll get, a little bit more freedom and then get that rolled back. And so that obviously adds to the uncertainty for everyone, children and families included.
Yeah. Yeah. As I was looking through and sort of trying to compile some of the questions that people have been asking, I realized that a lot of this is stuff that really we can be asking not just about children, but about everyone in our family. Grandparents, teenagers, ourselves. It really kind of is across the board that we're
Yeah,
yeah
absolutely. And
working through it.
I, one of the things that came up when I was discussing this with other colleagues who are counselors and psychologists, I probably, for context, it would be important for people to know a little bit about me, other than that, I attended the church for a while, but I'm a counselor educator. I specialize in career counseling, but as a counselor educator, I'm training people in masters of counseling programs for all types of counseling, and I have been doing that for quite a number of years. Currently at UBC on a contract, but formally as associate dean of an online university. So working online is not foreign to me. I've been working online and remotely and virtually with my teams for most of the last 25 years or so, teaching online since about 2001. So that part's not new, but what's new is that the rest of the world has joined me there, and that it happened so quickly. And so ironically, I'd retired from my online job and was really, really enjoying being able to teach face-to-face again for the first time in years. And now, of course, all of that teaching is online as well. So I think that's part of what's made this such a difficult time for people to understand, or for parents to explain to children, or even for spouses cohabiting a home together, trying to renegotiate space and what that space might look like, is that it came on so suddenly for us, like just really, in our case, over a weekend. The president of UBC made an announcement at 5:45 on Friday night, where most people would have been offline already, that all of the courses were going to be online by Monday morning. And so that, has meant that we haven't stopped working. Like it was probably 2 months before we even had a weekend, because the person I'm marrying on Saturday actually was area coordinator of a program at the university. And so there's all this behind the scenes stuff. And that's a microcosm of what's happening in in the church, in every job that every parent in the church is involved in. Daycare solutions fell apart. So people had, carefully crafted relationships with grandparents, and now grandparents were considered in that vulnerable age group, so better not, involve them. We've encouraged, and it's important to encourage social supports, and building a community and really helping each other. And overnight, all that stopped. It was don't talk to your neighbors, don't send your kids on play dates, don't do any of those things that would have been completely normal, that as a counselor I would have been encouraging my clients to do, to build in health and well-being and mental health within their homes and families. So it's something that we're navigating and we're learning as we go, just as the health rules have changed, and the rules around how we operate within our homes will have changed. And parents are saying, oh, I feel really bad about all the screen time that my kids have. Oh my goodness, it's survival. Like we all feel really bad about the amount of screen time. I don't want to continue to meet with people by Zoom, but we're doing what we do in order to stay connected. And so I think that part of the anxiety that parents are feeling, and probably it's being expressed to their children, and the kids are picking up on it, is, well, we're not doing what we had set out to do. We're not raising our kids the way we wanted to raise them. We're using TV as a babysitter. We're, encouraging them to spend time on their iPads, and we're feeling sick about that. And so part of what I would say to people is just be kind to yourself. That's what Bonnie Henry's been saying. But years before that, when I was, leading a huge team of university instructors, I tried to foster a culture of kindness and believe the best. And so I think that, for forgiving ourselves for not being able to have the perfect life that, we envision, is a good thing anytime. And right now, it's really, really especially important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I've definitely heard a lot of that, but it's difficult to remember that consistently.
Hmm.
It's easy to fall back into that idea that, like, especially because we don't necessarily have to be commuting to our jobs anymore. That I should have the time now to be not only keeping my child off screen, but homeschooling them essentially,
Yeah,
and continuing to you know to be in the family in the same way as I was before.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, it's
And
difficult.
and a lot of people are feeling that. So when I started to say, the psychologists and counselors that I consulted with, as I was thinking about this call, um, said to reflect as parents. I'm a parent. I'm a grandparent as well. To reflect on, is the anxiety we're seeing in our children a reflection of our anxiety? So, if I'm not able to enjoy this time and have some fun with it and make it okay to be less than perfect, then that tension for sure is going to carry through to the children. So that's not intended as one more thing to feel guilty about, but it's intended as a starting place to say, how are you? How am I with what's going on right now?
Mm.
I, mentioned briefly I'm getting married on Saturday, and so, my wedding plans are not what I expected the wedding to be, and that's uh, everyone is going through that in some way. Grads didn't have the graduation they expected. Kindergarten grads didn't have the kindergarten graduation they expected. It doesn't matter who you are, what age you are. Something dramatically has changed in terms of things that you'd anticipated, things you'd look forward to. People have looked forward to holidays, to travel, to camping, and there's never been in my lifetime in Canada anything that has permeated so many aspects of our lives. Like, we've never lost our religious freedom before to go to church, and sort of took it for granted. Maybe in some families, kind of wish that we didn't have to go to church and could just sit at home in our PJs and watch it live streamed. Well, now we can,
Yeah.
and we miss that connection with people. We miss seeing people, and so I think that that's sort of a place to start in families, is to say, what's changed and what has stayed the same. Like, what can we still do that keeps life normal? So I've heard of people, and I'm sure there's nothing I'm going to say that you haven't read or you couldn't Google and find out, but parents and kids that are now having dinners by Skype with grandparents or by Zoom with grandparents, and actually seeing them more often than they saw them before. So there are things that we can do to connect with people and to really build in ways of being excited about things and showing them what we're doing. So I would encourage that. Like, as a family, at this time of year, I would have been sitting down with my girls when they were young, planning something for every day of the summer. Like, what are all the things that we never have time to do? What would we like to do? Well, we're a little less locked down than we were a month ago, and so that's feasible locally. And so, what are some of the things we'd like to do? Who would we like to see? And even if they're not in our bubble, is it possible that we can see people, and do tailgate parties? We're seeing people do that, or backyard, parties where all the lawn chairs are positioned ahead of time and socially distanced. Can we connect, knowing that masks aren't going to completely prevent transition. They help a little bit. So can we have a mask party and decorate the masks ahead of time and, be really creative with it? So, what I'm finding that reduces the tension is having fun with it. So for our wedding, for example, a dear friend of ours who also attended Coquitlam years ago, is making us masks. And how wedding favors always have the name of the bride and groom, the date. Well, those are going to be on our masks. So there'll be things, that we won't wear for the whole day, but have made it fun and have said, hey, we're doing this in the midst of a pandemic, and this is something special. This is something we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. We've been able to live stream the wedding. So now friends and family from all over the world are joining us. So instead of saying, oh, which I did get into, not even a single one of my friends can come, because we've got such a large family now of just children and grandchildren combined, that's the size that we need to stick to. But now, it's opened it up far beyond my wildest dreams to people, and they're having fun with it. They're saying, oh, I'm going to put my suit on, I'm going to wear my best dress, and they're not even going to be on camera, but are really getting into the spirit of it. So I think that things like that in any family, like there's probably disappointment about a trip that's been canceled, but how could you virtually go on that trip? Could you do a scavenger hunt online and find pictures that might be pictures you would have taken on it? And can you, have a meal that is the meal that you would have had while you were on that trip? If your camping has been canceled or postponed, or you usually go somewhere that you can't get to now, can you do something like that? Can you replicate part of it in your backyard? So I think that, it's really thinking through, instead of all the things we can't do, what can we do? And how can we celebrate and just be excited and be creative and have some fun with those things? And recognize that it's not going to be perfect, and that it is okay as parents that we're tired, and it is normal that we're going to be grumpy and irritable, because this is a really uncomfortable situation to find ourselves in. And families that are in housing space that might have been just sufficient when people were all going out for the day, becomes a whole lot more tight when everyone's home for the day and trying to find places to work quietly and places to play and places to be away from each other. So it's a little bit like RVing. It's fun for the first day or so, but after 6 weeks it gets to be pretty small space. And that's what has happened to our homes, is that our homes have started to feel smaller. Our neighborhoods have become smaller. We're supposed to be shopping locally and doing things locally, so the whole world has sort of come in on us. And yet at the same time, we're inundated with horror stories from other parts of the world. And so that's again always been the case, but now it's so much more personalized, right? There's we hear death tolls in other countries. Well, our death toll in BC at the moment, any deaths have been horrific. And I had a colleague in New York who lost a spouse to COVID. So, it's horrific. I've got someone on my own team right now who's home sick with it. So, there's no doubt about the seriousness of it. But the numbers are amplified by hearing about the numbers from all the other regions of Canada. Then, of course, you add the United States to that, and then you add the rest of the world. So, for the children who are exposed to news stories and, just overhearing conversations, it can be so much more scary. And I think that, the conversations we have as parents or grandparents with our kids is super important, that we don't want to diminish the importance of it, the seriousness of it, because otherwise all the good we've done by isolating will be undone. So, the basic rules that you hear, the doctors stating over and over, and the prime minister, that you wear a mask if you can't, physical distance, you wash your hands, like all of those things are really, really important. But I think that we have to help our kids and grandkids understand that, that doesn't mean that we're all going to die. And I think that that's what's happening, that increases the anxiety, that people are taking one story and loading it onto another story. And the stories are about the same thing, but they're not about the same thing in the same context. And so it makes the crisis here seem so much worse. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I've definitely have heard that from a number of different places that children, they are hearing it and they're overhearing things. So are there some ways that we can talk about the seriousness of needing to comply with the rules without frightening children who may already be afraid, especially of a parent dying or becoming ill themselves?
Mm-hmm.
I think that can be a real worry for kids who aren't necessarily able to contextualize.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's our job, is to help them contextualize. So, what are we doing as a family to stay safe? So these are the things we're doing, that even though I'm going out grocery shopping, I'm washing my hands, I'm using sanitizer, perhaps wearing a mask, staying away from people. So I'm doing everything I can to not get sick. And yet sometimes people get sick. We get colds if we're out, we get the flu if we're out. And so even if we get sick, most people who are sick with this don't get very sick and they don't die. But what we'd have to do is be really, really careful if we were sick to stay away from other people so we don't spread it. Because some people, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, some of the people that are dying are people that already were a little bit sick. And so what we want to do is really make sure that we don't spread something to people who might not be strong enough to fight it off. But we're healthy, and this is obviously only the case in a family that is healthy and is doing all the right stuff. If you're in a family that's immune compromised to start with, you're going to have a different conversation. But if we're taking, the average family, then here are the things we're doing so that we're safe. Here are the things we're doing to keep other people safe, and why. And even if all of that doesn't work and some people get sick, and they do, and you've heard those stories, almost all of them are better. And so you could, share those stats from BC or from Canada that don't only talk about the people that are in intensive care, that's a really small number, but they talk about the people that have fully recovered. And I think the kids need to hear that story as well, because that's not the big news. That you don't listen to an hour-long news broadcast on the people that have recovered. You listen to an hour-long news broadcast, memorializing the people who haven't, which is a good thing. Like that, it's not that that's not important, but I think that the kids aren't getting the context, so it becomes so much more imminent for them and so much more frightening. That this is, if I do get it, if I have a cold or a cough, I'm dying. Or if I hear my parents cough, which might be the same cough that they've heard for their parents. I cough every morning. I've always done that. So they might hear something that's completely normal, and now they're catastrophizing around it. I think listening as well. Like we can talk to our kids, but just having quiet conversations where we're saying, what's going on for you right now? Or you seem a little bit sad, or you seem a little bit scared. Tell me a little bit about that. And that's going to be providing those quiet moments for the fears and the concerns to surface. And sometimes they're not what we expect at all. But I think it's important. It's important to, start with ourselves. If you're overly anxious, then it's very difficult to help your children not be anxious. But then also start with where they're at, and don't make assumptions about what they're thinking or what they've heard. They might have heard something from a friend that you can very clearly debunk and say that's not true, or the reason they're doing that is because their grandpa has cancer and is going through chemo treatments or whatever. And so even if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, we wouldn't go visit that grandpa when we had a cold or when we had the flu or something. So I think that would be really important to help them. The other thing that we know about anxiety, Meghan, is and depression, is the importance of being outside and the importance of getting exercise. And so again, if people are overly anxious about being outside, then they may have withdrawn into the house even more than usual, where being outside is just healing. It's healthy. It's important. And so you can be outside and be safe. And I think that, because the playgrounds were closed for a while, or because some places we would normally go are closed, or maybe are a little bit too crowded, that doesn't mean that we're not supposed to be outside. And so certainly what's kept me mentally healthy this whole time is going on really long walks and, just getting fresh air rather than sitting in front of my computer all day.
Sometimes easier said than done.
Oh, for sure. For
Yeah.
sure it is.
Yeah.
Like we've built in, we've just built it in wherever we could. And this last week, I haven't been outside as much as I usually would be, and I feel it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really great. Can you talk just a little bit about kids who came into this season already experiencing anxiety? Is there anything that parents should be watching for, or looking at where they felt like their child maybe they should start looking at some professional help, whether
Mhm.
it's anxiety or kids who already struggle with depression? I'm thinking maybe of some older teenagers,
Mhm.
or similarly maybe kids who've come in with different abilities, ADHD or autism, things like
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I think that as parents, we usually know our own kids best, and so what I would be watching for is shifts that are, like if as a parent you're getting frightened about a shift, then that's probably a good indication to consult, whether it's with a medical doctor or a counselor, psychologist, psychiatrist, very much the same as you would with any medical condition. So, your kids come in with a scrape on their knee, and you're probably not, in most cases, going to rush them to a hospital unless there's some, real compromised situation that would warrant that. But, we usually are very tolerant of some physical challenges that our children might face, just knowing, oh, that's a normal part of growing up. And so similarly with mental health, it's a normal part of growing up that people are going to experience a full range of feelings. And sometimes those feelings, particularly with adolescents, don't make sense. Like feelings are jumping around, and one minute they're really happy, and the next minute they're absolutely depressed, and the next minute they're scared. And that's just part of the hormone changes. And as parents, we know that. So what I would be concerned about is when you're seeing something prolonged, when you're seeing something that is not aligned with what we would call the stimulus. So, someone is overreacting to some news that they've heard or a story that they've heard in a way that, I use the expression talking them off the ledge, like you can't seem to do that. You can't seem to get through to them. Then, when it's got to the point that as a parent, you're aware that something's really different and it's beyond your ability to shift, I think that's a really good time to seek extra help. And very much like going to the doctor, sometimes you'll talk to a counselor and the counselor will say, this seems pretty normal to me, and be relieved by that rather than thinking, oh, I shouldn't have gone to a counselor. But also recognize that much of what you're experiencing and what your kids are experiencing is within the realm of normal, that there is no point on a scale, but it's a pretty big range. And some kids are just going to be more generally, sad, or not as responsive, not as engaged. And so maybe that shifted a little bit with COVID. But if it shifted, like let's say we're on a scale here and they started down here and they've moved down here, as long as they haven't moved way, off the screen, you're probably okay. But if somebody had started way over here and then you've noticed a shift and now they're way down here in the low range, I'd be more concerned about that. So even though that low range was the starting point for one kid, who I wasn't concerned about, I'd be concerned about it if I'd seen that huge shift from someone that was normally really positive to now, wouldn't leave the house, wouldn't talk to friends, wouldn't, do anything. So I think that that's what I would encourage parents to watch for, is what was normal, how much of a shift has happened, and does that shift make sense? Because there's been other, family things and life things that have gone on. So If a grandparent has died in the meantime, not even related to this, I'd expect a bigger shift. If a best friend, you know how kids are best friends one day and then not the next. And so a best friend has ostracized someone from their life or chosen someone else to be in their expanded bubble. Like that's going to be really hurtful. And so it would be quite normal to see a pretty big shift, but for your kids what that looks like, right? Like, how, are they going to move back up or are they going to stay down really low? So that's what I would watch for, rather than saying there's a particular indicator and if you see this, react. I would say look at what is normal, what's happening within your context, and is this something that seems to be on a bit of a downward spiral, or is it something that seems to have stabilized? The homework I assign most often to my students, to my colleagues, to my just every clients, everyone in my life, is to have fun. And I think that in a time like right now, it can be hard to remember to have fun. And so what are you building in as a family? What are you building in yourself, to just replenish that energy? Because a lot of the things that gave us joy, a lot of the things that we had to look forward to, we don't now. And many people would normally at this time of year, as I said, with my kids, we'd be planning our summer holidays. Well, summer holidays don't quite look the same when we've already been home for a few months, and maybe day camps have been canceled and stuff like that. So I think it is really important to build in some fun, and to turn, as much as we can, turn things into games, and make them more interesting than they were before. I have, in my career work, have co-developed with Deirdre Pickerel something called the career engagement model, but other people are calling it life engagement. And it's looking at matching capacity and challenge. And so if you've got too much challenge for the capacity that you have, or that collectively you have as a family right now, or that collectively you have as a church, if that capacity is lower than the amount of challenge you're experiencing, it's overwhelming and people feel overwhelmed. And if they're too overwhelmed for too long, they get disengaged. And disengagement can look the same, whether you got disengaged from being overwhelmed or from being bored. On the other hand, if you've got a lot of capacity that's being underutilized right now, so there's not enough challenge, people aren't engaged in their sports, they're not doing as creative things at work as they used to, a lot of their after school activities have been canceled. If all of that is happening, and so there's not enough challenge for the amount of capacity, then people feel bored and underutilized, and again end up disengaged and looking the same. But the fix is really different. So if you've got a kid at home, or you yourself are feeling completely overwhelmed, the fix is to reduce the challenge and build capacity. And so how might I reduce the challenge? I might ask someone else to take on some things that I need to do. I might back myself out of some commitments, saying when I took on the commitment, I thought I could pull this off. I can't now. So I'm going to try to find some ways to take a few things off my to-do list and just reduce the challenge and say I'll get to it later. But how can I build capacity? It's not just in me. I can stay healthy. I can, get engaged in physical activity. I can eat well. I can, go to bed at a decent time and, do all of the healthy things that builds capacity in me. But I can also reach out to the people around me and, engage other people in helping me out, or I could take a course. I could consult with someone so I can use Zoom better, whatever it is that we need to learn. And I think that just as that works for adults, it also works with kids. So, if they are disengaged, like not seeming like themselves, ask yourself whether that's because they're too challenged, they're overwhelmed, or they're not challenged enough and they're underutilized. And then come up with, once you know that, then it's easier to come up with some solutions and some ways to get them back on track.
Can you talk a little bit about some ways for some of the kids who have a lot of capacity, who maybe need more challenge, and with parents who, are trying to juggle their jobs and the changing sort of landscape. What are some ways that we could challenge those kids? I know a lot of parents that have some really highly capable children that
Mhm.
that can be an issue.
Yeah. So this becomes a very interesting time for learning. Like if people, if those highly capable kids are self-learners, then, it might even be a good time to enroll them in, some online courses that are enrichment, depending on their age, maybe even some pre-university courses that they could do. But also a time to really dig more deeply in some areas of special interest. So, they might have a topic that they want to learn more about, or they might want to be, depending on their age, interested in robotics, or interested in, thinking about where they're going to apply for university, or, researching different kinds of occupations and really finding out a lot about them, or learning how to make something that they would never have thought of making before. So, trying to come up with something that would have been impossible to do to fit in around, our normal lifestyle, but now where we've actually got some space carved out, that we can check in with them. They're being directed or engaged in that learning externally through manuals, or through courses, or through whatever. And as a parent, I can check in, periodically, and be excited and be interested in what they're doing, but not have to be the person who's doing the teaching and doing the directing and engaging them in it. So that could be one way. Another would be, depending on the situation of the family, to have the child and the parent sort of working on something together. So something that might have been a bit too hard under normal circumstances for a child to do, but the parent now is working from home and can demonstrate how to do it and model it, and sort of move them along a little bit. And, in that case, maybe even build capacity. You'd hire them as an assistant, and, build capacity to help the parents. So, in our family, that's how my kids, their first jobs were 10 or 11 years old, helping me in my business, doing whatever was age appropriate for them to be able to do. But it served two purposes. It kept them interested, and it also, helped me, and then we had more time to spend together. So, I would consider things like that. I would consider whether, these days, because so many people are working from home, it might be a unique opportunity to tie that child in with a mentor somewhere who, they might not have otherwise been able to connect, but, there might be someone who's an expert in whatever it is they want to do, that's willing to coach them. So that could be a family member. It could be, someone from the church. You could, set up a program in the church saying, we've got kids that are wanting to learn, this, and this. Do we have anyone who's an expert in robotics, or an expert in early civilizations, or an expert in the Greek language, or whatever it might be, and do some pairings that way as well.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought. We've got some online resources that we could maybe use to try to make that happen, depending on if
Mhm.
people are interested in doing that.
There's lots of free online resources as well. There's a site called lynda.com, lynda.com, that has lots of free for the first month, I think, and then you can register after that, but little mini lessons on so many things.
Mhm.
And so, it might be sites like that people, go into, and just start poking around and exploring. I know, the arts club, for example, is doing workshops online for kids. And so things that, before, if you were working all day and living in Coquitlam, you might not be able to get your kids into something in downtown Vancouver. But now that everything is online, it's actually opened up the world of opportunities. There's no reason why we couldn't be participating in something in the UK, or in Ontario, or in the southern states, or Australia. So the horizons for who we can learn with and who we can interact with are really open.
Yeah, I might put some links down in the bottom of this video then for some of that, maybe that site. And I know there are a couple others that were utilized when we went through the teacher strike and had to
Yeah,
figure out how to entertain our children at home.
absolutely.
I might also put down in the bottom just some resources, if you wouldn't mind providing some links, if parents do feel the need to try to reach out to a professional.
Hmm.
If there are some, just even some starting points on that. That's
Yeah.
something I don't want to go into it too much just because I think our time is going to be short for
Mhm.
Zoom here, but
I'll
yeah,
give it some thought. I know in Coquitlam, when I was there, one of my go-to resources was Dennis Boyd, and
yeah.
so I
Mhm.
don't, I imagine that you would already have thought of that, but I'm not sure who else is working in that general area now. But I think your family doctor is always a
Mhm.
really good starting place. So
Good to know.
whenever you're noticing a difference in your kids, you'd want to first rule out that there's any kind of a physical reason for it. And sometimes there is, they're lethargic or they seem really sad. Well, there could actually be something physically wrong. So start there. And then your doctors also will be really connected with counselors in the community and will know who to refer to.
Yeah. That's good to know. I'm not sure that's something that parents always think of right away, the family doctor. So often we separate sort of the physical with the mental and emotional side
Yeah.
of things. But
Yeah, I think it is really important that the two work together. So something that might be interesting for parents then is to even think about the difference between if a doctor refers to a counselor or psychologist or psychiatrist. So broadly, counselors, people like me, are there to be doing, to helping people with sort of general life problems. So, things like depression and anxiety can fit in that, but just feeling like social skills, being able to, friendship groups, that kind of thing. I'm a career counselor, so helping people plan their careers and find work. You get marriage counselors, people who are, helping couples relate well to each other. So counselors tend to, they use a variety of ways of doing it. Not everyone uses talk. You might use art therapy or play therapy or music therapy, or some people are much more, logical, cognitive, behavioral. Some are more experiential. Some are more narrative. There's a variety of different kinds of counseling, so you can find what suits you. But in general, what we have in common is that we're helping people with sort of normal problems in living.
mm,
In a clinical counselor, a mental health counselor, on the other hand, might have specialized in things like personality disorders. You'll hear of things like, bipolar, or different like anxiety or depression, when it's actually sort of a chronic state and it's going on for a long time. So then you've got people who are specialized in that, and you'll go to mental health centers, or sometimes mental health outpatients in hospitals, that kind of thing. So they're counselors as well, but they're counselors that are specializing a little bit more in the illness side rather than the wellness side, for example. But then psychologists are people who have gone on to get further education. They usually in BC have a PhD, not all, but almost all now. There were a few grandfathered in with a master's degree. So they've got more education and can be more involved in assessment, but many of them do counseling as well. And then psychiatrists are the ones that are different. Psychiatrists are actually medical doctors who have specialized in working with people's minds. And so what they can do that I can't do, for example, is prescribe medication.
mhm,
So it's not uncommon that someone would go to their doctor. The doctor might prescribe medication directly and send the person to a counselor to work through some of their problems in living. Or the doctor might say, I don't really feel capable of diagnosing this and figuring out what's really going on. So I want to send you to a psychiatrist who can do that and then work with you and provide what looks like counseling, but can also have that medical piece. So I think that's another really important thing for parents to realize, that, it's not all or nothing.
mhm,
I know when I was a parent before I was a counselor, I was thinking, oh, I wouldn't want to medicate, children. And yet we know from, so many kinds of things that our kids go through, that sometimes medication is needed to stabilize or to get someone to be able to be ready to move forward or to work through their problems. And so I think a doctor is a really good first stop for that as well, but that's not the only solution. Like, there's so many other solutions to helping people cope better, that don't require medication at all. But don't be afraid to talk to your doctor, and let the doctor know what it is that's concerning you and how you might like to proceed.
Can I ask a little bit about, as we sort of look through the summer, and understanding that no one really knows what's going to happen, and there's not a whole lot right now that we can say for sure will be happening in the fall.
Mm,
And I know, like I personally, and both of my sons, especially when they were young, struggled with transitions even in the best of times.
mhm.
So I was just hoping you could tell us a little bit about how we can equip our kids to sort of be flexible and make it through that difficult transition time. Just
Yeah.
I think part of it is that, like, I've been hearing a lot of parents saying, like, we just got used to being quarantined, and now we're sort of in this gray area where we're not really sure how far can we go, what can we do, and just the difficulty of that, personally, and then how do you manage that for your child?
Yeah. I think, as a Christian, that's just an interesting concept, isn't it? Because we know that we can't plan for the future, and yet we move forward as if we can plan for the future. And I remember when I was just a teenager in my late teens, one of my friends actually was killed in a car accident. But the last time I saw her before that, she had said something about, we were planning to do something, and she said, "Yeah, I'll be there, God willing." And we used to have that expression, God willing, a lot more in our vocabulary than we do now. And God willing took her to heaven instead, right? Like, we just, the most unexpected, shocking thing happened. And so I've thought a lot about this as a Christian, that this has been a wake-up call in the last few months, that we don't have complete control over our lives. We don't have complete control over how our country runs or how our economy runs. And that's been a good thing. And so I think that just even having that conversation, how much of what we felt we were in control of was an illusion, and how much do we always need to be flexible, not just right now.
Mhm.
But then I also think, a little bit of planning is important. And so I think it's helping kids and helping families to understand what they can reasonably predict is going to happen, and over what period of time, and then what will plan B be.
Mhm.
And so, we're having that conversation, in our extended family right now, because, we're sitting here on Tuesday. We're close enough to be able to get weather reports for Friday and Saturday. And it depends which site you go on, whether it's going to rain or not. So, like some of them say it will, some say 30%, some say 10%, some say, and that's the real world. Like, that's the world that we're moving in this summer. So we can reasonably look ahead and plan for, what we think Saturday is going to be like. And that's true for all the families planning. Should we go out for a drive this weekend? What's going to be open? What might we want to do? But we also need that flexibility to have a plan B and say, if something happens, if there's another lockdown, if we have to pull back, if one of us gets sick, all of those things are possibilities. They're not catastrophes. They're possibilities. But how are our plans going to adjust? Will we go ahead with some of us? Will we have something else that we could do, and we'll postpone this for another week or so? So I think it's, planning ahead to make the summer fun. I would be doing that. Whether there's as many things that we could do with our kids as we could in previous years. If it was still me with my girls looking ahead to summer, we'd be making a list. But we might have to be flexible about what order we do those things in, and we might want to have some inside activities and some outside activities. We might want to have some activities that are, much more with our smaller bubble now, or, what are some things we'd still love to do as an immediate family, or if we have some lockdown days at home, what would that look like? What are we sad that we didn't get to? And then what are the things that we'd really like to do once we're able to reach out to more people and include more people in our bubbles? And so I think that, looking ahead, we could still, fill a pretty fun summer, but just recognizing that we need a bit of wiggle room. I do a lot of work on resiliency. And I think that one of the things that has stretched our resilience in general is that we haven't left enough what would be considered white space in our lives. We've filled our lives so full. And, we know what that's like, that, we just can't do one more thing, or we can't have one more thing go wrong because we're stretched so thin. And it's a little bit like an elastic band. I don't know if any of you have ever cleared out an old file cabinet where elastic had been around paper, and now it's just crunchy, little bits of elastic. There's no stretch to it. And that's what happens to us if we're not doing the things that will replenish our energy. So, if you've been at home and not getting any outside time, you're stretched too thin. If you've been at home and spending way more time on the computer staring at a tiny little box on the screen like we're doing right now, you're stretched too thin. And so how are you able to vary those activities a little bit so that each day you're getting some of the work that needs to be done, some of the stuff around the house that needs to be done, some real fun things with each other and with kids, some fun things on your own as a parent with friends or with a partner. And how are you varying your day so that resilience is there, that when you need it, you're going to be able to respond to whatever comes your way.
Mm-hmm. And sort of going forward from there, can we talk a little bit about possibly returning to school in the fall? Are there some sort of pitfalls or some preparation that parents can be doing or thinking about as we will be moving from a sort of freer and more relaxed time maybe to a time when we do have to go back into these public spaces quite regularly?
Yeah. Well, I think, one of the things about fall is that we still are uncertain about what it's going to look like. So at the university level, for example, we're planning to teach our courses online in the fall. And it may be possible to, do some groups of people, but we don't know for sure. So we're at this end, at the instructor end, moving forward with, plans for multiple scenarios. And I think as families, that would be important. I think as families as well, it would be reinforcing, what are probably good, just general safety things. I was reflecting on this the other day where we actually had the opportunity to go out for lunch in a restaurant, which seems like such a wild, crazy thing to do right now. Patio, physically distanced, it was all safe. But I was just reflecting on how, we used to assume that it was just normal to go out and get colds, it was normal to get the cold or flu or something like that it just happened. And yet there have been less colds and flus because we're washing our hands and because we're keeping our distance from people. And so I think just talking in general with kids about what might be, better safety habits, just to start with. And then also helping the kids understand that the schools are putting a lot of thought into, and the public spaces are putting a lot of thought into how to do this well. That no school wants to be, a cluster. No store that you go into wants to be that store that, caused a cluster. So people everywhere are putting a lot of thought and a lot of effort into what they can do to keep us safe. And so I would, when we can get back to things like that, celebrate what's normal and be looking ahead with kids and saying, what are you really looking forward to? And what should we plan for? But recognize that things aren't going to all shift back at once. And so they can be planning, maybe with a little bit of flexibility.
Yeah. Yes, that will be an interesting time to see what we have ahead of us here.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so much of it is interconnected, isn't it, Meghan? So, there's schools, have been, we've certainly discovered through this, been used for childcare. Mm-hmm. And so when, that's not the main purpose for schools, kids can be educated in various ways. I've taught online for most of my career, but parents, can't leave children unattended. And if they, need to be other places, then school is the place that their kids have been, and out of school care and whatever other supports are in place. And so I think that, as we're going forward, looking for what other structures, what's our backup plan, and recognizing that the assurance that we had that life was just going to carry on as normal wasn't the case.
Mhm.
And so how can we build more support so that we don't only have one way of doing life going forward?
Mhm. Yeah. Is there anything that the church can be doing? Of course, we do sort of have some irons in the fire there, but is there more that the things you can think of that the church could be doing to encourage that kind of community that helps build resiliency in families?
Well, I think that by providing opportunities for people to connect and to talk, is certainly one way of doing it. I think by partnering or pairing people. So when I was mentioning that if someone really wants to learn something and you've got someone in the church that can help them learn that, that would be awesome. I think that, understanding from the parents as you've done, what their biggest concerns and their biggest needs are is helpful. I think, certainly from the parents that I've talked to, childcare is just hugely concerning right now. So, I don't know that that's anything that the church can help with, but that would make a huge difference in a lot of people's lives. Maybe even providing, a bit of a clearinghouse for needs. So I remember years ago when I was working with youth at the church, we had sort of a job jar of things that needed to be done, and then we could deploy youth to help with that. Well, even with social distancing, there might be some needs that you could serve as a unifying place to connect people, even if it's virtually.
Mhm.
So I think that it's helping people know that they have a place to belong. I'm sorry, I don't even know if you're back to meeting as a congregation again.
No, and we don't foresee it's going to be quite a while still. We haven't, I don't want to announce like a solid date
Yep.
yet, but yeah, it'll be some time through the summer at least that we will not be
Yeah,
meeting physically together. That does spark a question in me though, because one thing we have seen is an outpouring of people offering help of various kinds, and we have taken some people up on the in some small things, but what we've not seen is a lot of asking for help.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. So I think normalizing that, and maybe even putting out some of the offers of help in a tangible way where people can say, oh yeah, that's the kind of help I could use. Because I think a lot of us feel like we should be self-sufficient, but I know two churches that I'm involved in right now, because my life is obviously in transition, have had their small groups meeting by Zoom,
mhm,
and that's kept people connected. And then as the lockdown eased a little bit, they met in somebody's yard with lawn chairs that were social distance, and they all brought their own snacks. And
mhm,
so people have found creative ways of getting together, and I think that that's something the church can do, whether it's physical or not. Providing those means for people to be connected and talking to each other. One of the churches that I had been going to is still holding their church picnic, but they're doing it in 3 different locations, and a maximum of 50 at each, and they had to sign up. And 2 of the locations have children's activities and 1 doesn't. So if you don't want noisy kids around, then you would go to the 3rd one. But and then they planned it and the day rained, and so they had to postpone it to another one. But I think that there are things that we can do. You've got big space there, even if it's in the parking lot. And so how can we provide safe opportunities for people to gather, see each other, wave? Some schools in Chilliwack, the teachers have been doing drive-bys through the neighborhood, so they've got the class list of all the addresses of their kids, and they tell them what time they'll be driving by, and the kids go out and wave and the teachers wave. So people have been doing really fun, creative things to, and the church and the community is just well positioned to do that.
mhm.
So I would encourage you to do everything you can to keep people connected and to keep some of your groups that would normally be meeting going, even if it's virtual.
Yeah. Yeah, we've been able to do quite a bit of that, and people have been pretty creative about how they are getting together in various groups.
Yeah.
It's been encouraging to see actually um, how much people have been coming together like you were saying in the very beginning, maybe even more often
Yeah.
and in more meaningful ways than they
Yeah.
were before. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, what we're recognizing through this is that some people who were isolated are actually more connected because people have time and are being conscious of reaching out. But some people will be more isolated. We may not have known they were isolated. They were out and about, coming to church, involved in all sorts of meetings, but we might not be thinking of them living alone and not having any family to connect with. I know one story of a guy that's doing an internship at a Christian organization, and he's now working from home, but his home is a dorm room, and
Mm.
his family lives in Singapore, and so he's living alone in a dorm room all day, trying to work with people. And so, I would just try to encourage you to be really strategic and think about, who in your life, or who in the church family, or for any of your families, who in their extended family might be that person that really is isolated right now. And they might not be the neediest person. They might be someone who has a car and can go out grocery shopping and do all of that, but they just might not have a lot of social contacts outside of the activities that they had been registered for and involved in, and they might not have personal friendships. So those are the people that I'd encourage you to be finding a way to reach out to.
Yeah. I think that's been one really blessing, is that one way we are growing is that we wouldn't necessarily have thought of those people before as being necessarily in need. When you see people at the activities, you see people at meetings, you sort of make assumptions. And yeah, if they're not sort of in some sort of material need, then you don't think of them necessarily.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm hoping that we come out of this more compassionate, more aware of the people around us, and yeah, better neighbors.
I agree. Yeah, I think there's lots of blessings in this, and it's connecting people like this that we wouldn't maybe have done otherwise. So I think we've got a lot to learn each other. And what you said, about people not reaching out for help, it's important to normalize that
Mhm.
we've been trained to be so self-sufficient in this society, and it's much more healthy to find ways to connect, and part of connecting is by acknowledging that you've got some needs.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for your time today. I
Okay.
really appreciate it. And I know your week has been so busy, but I think this will be really good. We're going to put this out not just for parents, but grandparents, and pretty much like the whole congregation will have access to our conversation today. So,
Right. Well,
so
I know those grandparents are anxious for a hug, so I can
I'm
remember
sure they
the
are.
time.
That
Yeah,
loss of that physical
yeah,
touch it's becoming almost like physically hurtful.
yeah, yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. Yes, yeah.
It's a I've heard of stories of little kids in like hazmat suits, and they just
Oh,
so they could have that one hug.
oh,
Yeah,
that's fantastic.
it's
That's
struggle,
awesome.
but
Okay.
we'll learn to muddle along. Roberta, can I just pray for you really quickly before I let you go?
That would be awesome.
Yeah, let's pray. Let's pray together. Heavenly Father, what can we say as we come to you today, except that we just surrender our plans to you? We're learning day by day now, not to lean on our own understanding, but to seek your kingdom, Father God, and just to understand that we truly don't have control over the situation, but that you do, Father God, and that you are a good and loving God. So we thank you for the good plans that you have for us, for our families. We thank you especially for Roberta's plans. What a joy it is to hear about a celebration coming this weekend. Father God, I pray for good weather. I pray for joy and just all of your blessings on that wedding day, just an echo of the wedding day that we all will attend someday in your presence. We pray these things in your loving and mighty name, the name of Christ Jesus. Amen.
Right.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Well, thanks again. I will
Lovely
be
to connect with you.
posting this up on YouTube, and yeah, if who knows what the future brings? I might be calling you again.
Anytime. I'm always happy to help. Take care.
All right. Thanks. You too.
Bye-bye.
Bye.